Linda Crawford had managed the Westlake Elite Fitness Club for nearly 13 years, and in her mind, she ran it like a ship, tight, polished, and by the book. The gym wasn't just a gym. It was a place for professionals, high earners, and the right kind of people. That's how she described it to new hires during training. She prided herself on knowing nearly every regular member by name, from the corporate executives on the rowing machines to the yoga moms sipping green smoothies in the cafe. So when she saw an unfamiliar face in the private spa lounge that Thursday morning, her instincts kicked in like a silent alarm. The woman sat calmly in the VIP section, dressed in sleek black athletic wear and white sneakers that looked more expensive than anything Linda had ever owned. She wasn't sweating or stretching. She wasn't even holding a gym bag. She was just there, relaxed, sipping cucumber-infused water, scrolling through her phone like she belonged. Linda narrowed her eyes from behind the glass wall that separated the main floor from the exclusive member lounge. That area wasn't for day pass visitors or guests. It was reserved for premium tier members who paid thousands annually. And Linda was sure she had never seen this woman before. Her fingers tapped sharply on the tablet she always carried, flipping through the day's check-in logs. No name matched. No profile picture matched. She glanced back through the glass. The woman was now leaning back, crossing her legs, one arm resting over the chair's armrest, her phone in hand. Linda muttered under her breath and headed toward the front desk. She motioned to Brielle, the young receptionist with the long braids and nervous energy. "Did you check that woman into the lounge?" Linda asked. Brielle looked confused. "Which one?" "In the VIP area. Black woman, mid-40s, wearing black." "She's not in the system." Brielle's hands fumbled with the keyboard. I didn't see her come in, but maybe someone else." "No," Linda snapped. "No one else has access to check-in for VIP. It's either you or me. She must have slipped in." "Maybe she has a VIP pass," Brielle offered gently. Linda didn't respond. Her lips thinned as she turned and walked off, leaving Brielle to stare at the screen in silence. In her office, Linda debated whether to approach the woman directly. But her gut told her this needed to be handled officially. She opened the security app on her desktop and pulled up the live lounge feed. There she was again, calm, composed, completely at ease. "She's too comfortable," Linda whispered to herself. She dialed security. "I need someone to check the VIP lounge. Possible unauthorized entry," she said. Minutes later, when the uniformed security guard returned saying the woman wouldn't provide identification and claimed she didn't need to, Linda took it further. She picked up the phone and called. "The local precinct," her tone rehearsed and concerned. "I believe someone may be trespassing inside our private facility. She refuses to verify her membership and is occupying restricted space." By the time the officers arrived, Linda had already rehearsed what she would say. She stood at the lobby entrance, hands folded, lips tight. The police entered calmly, one of them adjusting his radio. "She's in the back," Linda said, pointing. "Please be respectful, but firm. We have rules here." As the officers walked toward the lounge, Linda followed at a distance, not quite hiding, but not standing in the open either. She wanted to watch it unfold, but didn't want to look too eager. Through the glass, the woman stood as the officers approached. There was no panic, no confusion. She simply put down her drink and waited. Linda smirked. Finally, order was being restored. But the next few minutes wouldn't go how she imagined. Not even close. Ava Mitchell didn't blink as the two officers entered the private lounge. The taller one gave a nod of acknowledgement. The other kept his hands near his belt, unsure of what exactly they'd find. She stood quietly, graceful in her stance, her calmness unsettling to those who expected confusion or resistance. "Ma'am," the taller officer began, "we were called regarding a possible trespassing issue. May we speak with you for a moment?" Ava glanced at him without raising her voice. "Of course," she replied, setting her glass of water on the side table. Her tone was firm, measured, not defensive, just composed. "Are you a member here?" the officer asked, glancing over her shoulder at the spa's lavish interior. "I'm more than that," Ava said smoothly. She walked a few steps to her gym, bag resting beside a modern lounge chair. She unzipped it, pulled out a slim leather folder, and opened it with care. Inside was a badge and an identification card that gleamed beneath the overhead lights. The officer leaned in. His posture shifted as he read the name. Ava L. Mitchell, Chief Executive Officer, Westlake Wellness Group. She didn't move. "I purchased this chain 3 weeks ago," she said calmly. "The documents were signed, and the transition of ownership was finalized last Friday. I've toured 6 of our locations since Monday. This is the 7th. The younger officer swallowed hard and took a small step back. I see. "We weren't informed. You weren't supposed to be," Ava said, her eyes steady. "I don't walk into my properties to be seen. I walk in to observe how they're managed when no one knows who's watching." Behind the glass, Linda's face paled. She could no longer hide. One of the officers turned toward her and motioned for her to come closer. Hesitating, Linda stepped forward, each movement stiffer than the last. "Is this the person who made the report?" Ava asked, not bothering to look at her directly. The officers nodded. "I see," she said. "And what exactly did she claim?" The officer glanced at his notepad. "She said someone had entered the private lounge without authorization, refused to present identification, and might have breached facility protocol." Ava's eyes narrowed slightly. "Interesting. I was never asked for ID. I was never approached. I was never spoken to. I've been sitting here for over an hour, entirely undisturbed." Linda opened her mouth to respond, but Ava raised a hand, without looking at her. "I'm not interested in excuses," she said. "I'm interested in systems, in behavior, in how people are treated when they don't look like your regular clientele." Linda's throat felt dry. She tried to find words, but every sentence she rehearsed in her head fell apart before it reached her lips. "I've managed this location for over a decade," she finally said. "And in that time, how many black women have you accused of trespassing?" Ava asked. Linda's silence answered the question. The room hung heavy with tension, but Ava wasn't angry. She wasn't shouting. She didn't need to. Her calm was more powerful than any raised voice could have been. The taller officer cleared his throat. "Ma'am, we apologize for the misunderstanding." "You don't owe me an apology," Ava replied. "You responded based on what you were told. She owes me the apology. And more than that, she owes this entire staff a lesson." The younger officer looked toward Linda, who was now visibly sweating. Ava turned toward her, finally meeting her gaze. "Your job is to manage this place with fairness, discretion, and respect," she said. "Instead, you decided I didn't belong. You acted on assumption. You embarrassed your staff, involved law enforcement unnecessarily, and disrupted a peaceful morning because you couldn't imagine that someone like me could be in a place like this for the right reasons." Linda lowered her eyes. Her voice was barely audible. "I made a mistake." Ava shook her head. "You made a decision. Mistakes are when we forget a name or miss an appointment. What you did was a choice." There was no sound for several seconds. Even the air conditioner hummed more softly, as if the room itself was holding its breath. Ava turned to the officers again. "Thank you. You can go. There's no further need for your presence." They nodded, quietly exited, leaving Linda standing alone in the center of the lounge. Ava sat back down, picked up her glass, and took a slow sip. "You'll hear from corporate," she said, without emotion. "Until then, I suggest you reflect deeply on what made you feel entitled to call the police on someone simply existing in a space she owns." Linda left without another word. Her steps were small, careful, as if the floor had turned to glass beneath her. Ava closed her eyes briefly, allowing the silence to settle once more. She didn't need to announce anything. She'd said enough. Now it was time to watch who would learn and who would retreat further into their fear. What had started as a quiet visit had become something larger, a moment that would ripple through walls, across emails, into meetings, and into minds that hadn't been challenged in years. Ava had come to inspect the gym. Instead, she exposed its weakness. By noon the next day, word had spread across the Westlake Elite facility like a match dropped in dry grass. No official memo had gone out yet, but the whispers were constant, louder than the sound of treadmills or clanging weights. Staff members exchanged glances, some with raised eyebrows, others with tight lips. Everyone knew something had happened, and most of them knew who had caused it. In the break room, Brielle sat quietly stirring her tea, her phone buzzing with message after message from co-workers across other branches. A short video clip had surfaced, blurry, taken through the spa's tinted glass. It showed two uniformed officers standing before a composed black woman holding a badge. The caption underneath read, "When the CEO visits and the manager calls the cops on her." The comments underneath ranged from disbelief to anger. "How does this still happen?" one read. "Imagine having so much confidence in your assumptions that you call the cops on your own boss," another added. Brielle scrolled in silence, unsure whether to laugh or cry. Linda stayed in her office most of the day. The blinds were drawn, the door shut, the hallway around her eerily quiet. People avoided knocking. The ones who usually greeted her with forced politeness now passed, with no eye contact. A printed schedule hung untouched on her bulletin board. It no longer felt like she was in charge of anything. By late afternoon, a message from corporate arrived in every staff inbox, marked with high importance. It addressed the incident without naming names, but the tone was clear. It emphasized professionalism, inclusion, and accountability. Attached was an invitation, mandatory attendance for a live video seminar titled Perception, Prejudice, and the Modern Workplace, led by the company's Diversity and Ethics Board. The meeting was scheduled for Monday morning. Linda's face tightened as she read the email. She knew it was coming, but seeing it in black and white made it feel heavier. She sat back in her chair, staring at the screen while her hand hovered over the mouse. For the first time in years, she felt like she didn't belong in her own office. Meanwhile, Ava had returned to her hotel suite, a quiet corner of downtown with wide windows and a skyline view. She hadn't spoken publicly about what happened. There were no posts, no statements, no press. She didn't need to. Her silence was deliberate, and it carried more weight than 1,000 angry tweets. She reviewed reports from other branches, scanned employee feedback, and took notes, but her mind drifted back to that lounge. The way Linda looked at her, not with confusion, but certainty. It wasn't the mistake that bothered her. It was the confidence behind it, the belief that she didn't belong in a space she owned. Later, that evening, Ava received a text from Mr. Daniels, the regional operations director. He asked if she wanted him to handle the situation personally. She replied with a short message, "I'll take care of it myself. Saturday arrived with the usual flow of members at the gym, but everything felt different. People were quieter, more cautious. The receptionist kept her eyes on the door. The trainers didn't joke as much. There was a tension in the air, like something unspoken pressed down on everyone's shoulders. Linda didn't show up. No one asked why. Just after noon, Ava walked in wearing a dark blazer, pressed jeans, and soft leather shoes. Her presence shifted the atmosphere instantly. The front desk staff stood up straighter. A couple of members paused mid-step. She nodded politely to everyone and walked directly toward the employee conference room at the back of the building. She called for a short team meeting. Trainers, maintenance, receptionists, cafe staff, all were invited. Within minutes, a small group had gathered, unsure what to expect. Ava stood at the front of the room, arms relaxed at her sides. "I'm not here to talk about what happened," she began. "I'm here to talk about what happens next." The room was still. She continued. "Assumptions have power. They shape behavior, influence decisions, and determine outcomes. The wrong assumption made about me could have had very different consequences. If I hadn't had a badge, if I hadn't stayed calm, or if the responding officers weren't respectful." Eyes lowered across the room. "I don't want apologies. I want awareness. I want this place to become better. Not just polished floors and fresh towels, but a culture that treats every member, every guest, and every colleague with dignity." A few heads nodded. "I'll be conducting anonymous reviews over the next month. Not to punish, but to listen. If you have something to say, say it. If you've been treated unfairly, share it. This place won't grow by hiding its cracks." "Oh," young trainer raised a hesitant hand. "Are you replacing the manager?" Ava's eyes didn't shift. "That depends on what she chooses to do next." After the meeting, as the staff returned to their duties, something in the building felt lighter. Not cheerful, but clearer, like fog had begun to lift. Even the sunlight spilling through the gym windows seemed warmer. Linda remained absent, and Ava remained unshaken. She didn't need to prove anything. She already had. Monday morning came with a strange quiet. The gym opened on time, lights humming softly as early risers filed in. No one spoke much. Even the usual greetings were subdued. Every employee knew what day it was. The diversity seminar was scheduled for 10 sharp, and everyone was expected to attend. Linda arrived just after 9. Her steps lacked their usual energy. She didn't carry her clipboard, didn't bark orders, didn't check the lobby. She walked directly to her office, her face drawn and pale. A file folder rested in her hands, clutched tighter than necessary. Behind her, whispers followed like a shadow. At exactly 10, the conference room filled. Staff lined the walls, some curious, others uncomfortable. The projector displayed the company's logo, the title of the seminar bold across the screen. Ava walked in minutes later, composed as always, carrying nothing but a bottle of water. She didn't smile. She nodded once and took a seat in the corner. The seminar began. A guest speaker from corporate introduced himself, walked through slides about implicit bias, unconscious assumptions, and respectful engagement. Examples were shared, scenarios dissected, and everyone listened. Some leaned in, others looked away. But the message hung in the air like a lesson that refused to be ignored. Linda sat in the back, silent. She took notes, but never raised her head. When it ended, the speaker thanked the staff and left quietly. Most employees returned to work, some stopping to speak softly with Ava, offering thanks or reflections. Linda stayed seated after the room had cleared. Ava didn't move either. Eventually, Linda stood, clutching the folder to her chest. She walked toward Ava, each step deliberate. Her voice barely rose above a whisper. "May I speak with you?" Ava gestured toward an empty chair. Linda sat slowly. She looked older than she had last week. Less certain. More human. "I've written a formal letter," she said, sliding the folder forward. "It includes an apology to you, the staff, and our members. I also requested that corporate review my conduct. I'm not here to defend anything. I just wanted you to know I take full responsibility." Ava didn't open the folder. "I made assumptions," Linda continued, "not based on behavior or rules, but appearances. I thought I was protecting something, but the truth is, I was protecting an image. One that didn't include people who didn't look like me." Ava's expression didn't change. "I've spent years in this role, and somewhere along the way, I convinced myself I had the right to decide who belonged. I forgot what leadership actually means." Silence filled the space between them. "Not awkward, just honest. I understand if you want me gone," Linda added. "I never said that," Ava replied calmly. "But you could." "I could," Ava agreed. She leaned back in her chair. "But I'm more interested in change than punishment." Linda nodded slowly, her eyes glistening. "I don't need a letter," Ava said. "I need to see who you are when no one's watching. That's what leadership is, not the public moments, but the private ones." Linda wiped at her eye discreetly. "What should I do?" Ava stood. "Start by showing up, not as the person who guards doors, but as someone willing to open them, listen more, speak less, earn back the trust, not through speeches, but action." Linda rose too, unsure whether to speak again. Ava offered a small nod and walked out, leaving Linda standing alone. Later that week, a company-wide email was sent out. This one from Ava herself. It introduced a new initiative, the Listening Project. Each branch would host monthly open forums where staff and members could speak freely, share stories, offer ideas, and build community beyond fitness. The response was overwhelming. Suggestions poured in, stories surfaced. People felt seen. At Westlake, things began to shift. Linda no longer sat behind her desk all day. She made rounds, greeted everyone by name, and, more importantly, listened without judgment. The rigid manager softened. She asked questions she never used to care about. She started staying late, not to watch, but to learn. One evening, Brielle found a handwritten note taped to her locker. "I should have trusted your instinct. Thank you for your patience." Brielle smiled. It wasn't much, but it was a start. A month passed. Then, 2. The gym started to feel different. Not just cleaner, but warmer. The culture changed, not overnight, but slowly, genuinely. One afternoon, Ava returned. No blazer, no briefcase, just her gym gear and a soft smile. She entered like any other member. But people noticed. They always did. Linda approached, not with nerves this time, but with quiet resolve. "Welcome back," she said. "Good to be here," Ava replied. Linda hesitated, then added, "Thank you for not giving up on me." Ava looked around at the staff, the space, the quiet hum of trust rebuilding itself. "I didn't," she said, "but I did expect you to rise. And you did." As Ava walked toward the yoga studio, Linda turned to return to her duties. Not as a watchdog, not as a gatekeeper, but as someone finally worthy of the title she'd held for so long. Because redemption isn't about erasing the past. It's about earning the future.